Hello, everybody. There's a very good number of people that have joined and tuned in, so we will start. And welcome to this very special Just Drinks webinar brought to you by DuPont Nutrition and Biosciences. A very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for signing up and taking the time out to be here for what I hope will be a very useful session. And crucially, that you walk away from this with some practical tips and takeaways that will help you to improve the sustainability of whatever it is you are doing. And that's what we've promised, and that's what we aim to deliver over the next hour. So why this webinar now? Well, the world faces an almighty climate crisis, as we know. I'm almost always conscious of not being too alarmist when it comes to setting the scene for these things, but reports that came out last week or week before, I think it was, from Imperial College said that the Earth has lost more than 28 trillion tons of ice since 1994. Now, of course, the loss of our ice sheets is obviously only one way to establish the size and scale of the crisis we face, but it's a significant number. And I think the most alarming thing, as the scientists that led that report made very clear, is that about 57% of that ice loss has occurred in the last 10 years. So things are getting worse, and they're getting worse fast. So urgency and taking action is absolutely key, and that's what we wanted to sort of focus on during this session. Obviously honing in on brewing and the production of beverage, but improving sustainability, reducing climate change impacts, reducing water use, improving energy efficiency, all of these things now more important than ever, and we have to act and do something about it. So that's what we're going to explore over the course of the next 60 minutes. First up, let's just do a brief introduction of the people you're going to hear from today. That's me on the right-hand side. My name's Tom Idle. I'm a writer and content producer specializing in all things sustainable business, and I'm going to be your moderator today, keeping the whole conversation flowing and making sure that our panel gets to hear your questions and we have some useful conversation. We have Nick Martin, who is Executive Director at BEER, the Beverage Industry Environmental Roundtable. We have Simon Boas Hoffmeyer, who is Senior Director for Sustainability and Comms at Carlsberg. And we have Jens Eichen, who's Global Product Manager at DuPont Nutrition and Biosciences, specializing in brewing and distilling enzymes. So here's how it's going to work. We're going to ask each of our panelists to spend a few minutes giving their take on what it takes to be more sustainable in brewing. We're going to first hear from Nick, who is going to give us a scene setter, outlining some of the challenges we face, but also some of those big opportunities. Then we're going to hear from Simon, who's going to give us the Carlsberg story, what's been achieved and how. And then we'll dive into some of the more specific solutions with Jens, who will explore the role of enzyme technology and what that means for sustainability. And then what we'll do, we'll open things up for questions from you, our lovely audience, and we'll get through as many of your questions as possible. On your screen somewhere, I know it differs from different computers, but there will be a questions box. That's what you need to use to submit your question. Just type your question in there, hit the return button, and we'll start receiving those. And we'll go through, as I say, as many as we can in the next hour. That question box is available throughout the whole of the webinar. So whenever you think of a question, please do type it and submit that. Don't wait till the end, but we will do the Q&A towards the end of the session. We're also going to run a few polls during the hour, just as a useful way of us to better understand the challenges that we're all facing, what's really sort of driving you to take action, and then what some of the things you need and support you might need in pursuit of more sustainable brewing. So before we get on with this, let's do that first. Let's launch our first of these polls right now. Let's just see if we can get this working. 1 second. Okay, so it's on the screen. I need your responses right now if you can. So where are your sustainability efforts providing the most value creation right now? So select one of the following. Is it risk avoidance? Is it cost savings? Is it gaining the competitive advantage? or is it revenue and reputation? So I'll give you maybe 30 seconds if you can just submit your answer, and then what we'll do is we'll have a look at the results of these polls as we go through the hour's session. And I think it'll be a useful way of us just gauging the temperature in the room among the people that have tuned in, which will be really helpful for you and us as well. So I'm going to close that poll now. As I say, we'll look at the responses shortly. And let's jump in with our first panelist, Nick, who's going to give us a scene setter. Nick, over to you.
Great, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Good start. So welcome, everybody. Appreciate your time today. Looking forward to this session. As Tom mentioned, I'm Nick Martin. I'm the Executive Director of the Beverage Industry Environmental Roundtable, or BEER, and also Sustainability Practice Lead at Antea Group. So I'm going to give us a little bit of context here for this webinar, a little context around sustainability, and then how it ties to the beverage sector. Next one, Tom. So BEER is a coalition of global beverage companies covering beer, wine, spirits, soft drinks, and other categories. We're pretty excited. 2021 is going to be our 15th year together. We've continued to grow and continued to kind of expand our topic area of the areas we're working in. But it's all been around this shared vision of these companies coming together, and this vision around the beverage industry being globally recognized as the leader in environmental sustainability, and we all take a lot of pride in that. We've tried very hard to not be complacent, to really say sustainability is a journey, and how can we be a leading sector on that journey, and really share what we're learning as we go. You know, the topic today is around environmental sustainability. So, you know, why do our members in BEER care about it? The first thing I always say is it's just fundamental business. You know, it's really not about environmental sustainability or, you know, social sustainability or corporate responsibility. It's really business sustainability, and how do you make your business resilient? And all of these topics around environmental are very key to that. All over the world, we're seeing environmental challenges faced by companies and other stakeholders. And then combining that with social and governance and the full kind of ESG program is something that's shown to really differentiate companies that do it well and do it right. And so, you know, just for your company alone, your CEO, your CFO, your C-suite, they care about these topics, they care about these issues, or they increasingly should care about them. And so that's really where it starts, is your leadership within a company. Next one, Tom. And then what I want to go through is just some other stakeholders that are really critical on this, and really critical in determining, you know, why environmental sustainability, why now? Like, why should you be embracing this as a company? And it really starts inside. You know, employees do care. They increasingly care about these topics. If you look at the challenge around talent and the battle around talent, this is becoming a bit of a differentiator. You know, people want to work for a reason. Obviously, sales is really critical and so forth for your company, but they're looking for more of a purpose to their daily lives. You know, going to work every day, and what are they trying to accomplish, and what are they a part of? And so it's becoming really important, and especially for younger talent that really do understand and care about these issues. And then you see it on the slide there. You know, companies with a purpose, they bring in great people, and they're showing to be more productive and more innovative. And so we're starting to see sustainability really play a role there. And then if you move out, you know, customers are definitely caring about these topics. You know, we saw it years ago with some of the early surveys from some of the large retailers, namely Walmart. They started asking questions of their suppliers, looking at their footprint of their products, looking at their programs, their processes, the tools they were using to reduce the impact of their products that retailers were going to sell in their stores. And you know, since then, we've just seen this exponential growth in surveys and data requests and analytics, which is not going to go away. You know, like it or not, we live in what's a lot of people call kind of a radically transparent world, where information is just key. And, you know, I've seen a lot with our clients and our BEER members where, you know, responding to these surveys and requests is becoming almost a full-time job. just because there's so many inquiries coming in from investors and stakeholders and researchers and NGOs, et cetera, that it's becoming a big driver for enhancing sustainability programs. Next one. And then, investors, obviously, investors are really key for most public companies. If you look at, access to capital and costs, insurance and premiums, investments in technology, you really need to be attractive to investors. And, investors are getting very, very smart about these topics, whether it's water or climate change or decarbonization or all of them coming together. You see a number of logos here. You could add 100 more, within that bubble. We're all pretty familiar with the BlackRock letter. That's gotten a lot of attention, or letters. That's gotten a lot of attention. But there also are a lot of new platforms that are out there. There's new research organizations, and it's really bringing this information to light, where companies really cannot hide behind anything these days. Anything can be kind of discovered about a company, and so it's really important to figure this out, to have this be part of your governance of your organization, but also, like we say there, also control your narrative, because if you don't, somebody else is going to control that for you, and it really can have a ripple effect on your company, especially your relationships with investors. So really critical to focus on that. And then more broadly, society cares. You see the list of global risks here from the World Economic Forum. They publish that every year. You could tie almost all of those to environmental sustainability in some manner. And, people are paying attention. People are feeling these challenges. Obviously, we joke here, 2020, enough said. There's plenty of things kind of on our plate in 2020 in society. And a lot of them do relate to resiliency and to environmental sustainability and the health of our planet. So that's a huge driver. Go to the next one. And then there are others. Consumers are starting to really kind of demonstrate this, that, within their purchasing and buying habits. Regulators and governments, you're seeing this all over the world with new regulations around water allocations or zero liquid discharge or carbon pricing, carbon taxes, greenhouse gas, mandated greenhouse gas reporting, things like that. Younger generations and future leaders. I have 2 teenage boys. They just inherently get this much more than I would have as a kid. And so it's becoming a little bit of a fabric of our society of just understanding the importance of sustainability. And then last but not least is nature. It's unforgiving, and it never loses. So we have to be conscious of that we have to protect nature because we depend on it so heavily. So with that kind of context, my main takeaway for today is really this. If you go to the last one, is, everything's important. You could have a list of 40, 50, 60 different ESG topics. They're all important, but not everything can be important. You can't work on all 60 of those topics the same way as a company. It's just impossible. So, my takeaway for you today would be define what is material for your company and make it material. Really embrace it, figure out what you want to do, and stay committed to that. That needs to look across your value chain. So look upstream at your sourcing, look at your production and manufacturing, and then look downstream as well into the market. What are those big hotspots, both risk hotspots, but also opportunity hotspots to really use this as an advantage for your company? I feel like our beer members have done this extremely well. Carlsberg is a prime example of that, which Simon will share their story here in a bit. But that's really the key, is figure out what sustainability means to your company and what is really most material and embrace it. So with that, you see my contact information here. Feel free to reach out, definitely connect with beer. We love to engage stakeholders, so follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and then reach out to us as well. With that, appreciate your time. I think we're gonna look at those poll results and then continue to move on our webinar.
Thank you, Nick. That's great. That's really useful in setting the scene for this conversation. It leads us nicely into Simon's presentation shortly, but so many good reasons to kind of take sustainability seriously and get this right. Questions from our audience, please do keep them coming in. Use the questions box, submit them at any point during the next hour, and we'll get to them shortly. Before we hear from Simon at Carlsberg, let's have a quick look at the results of that first poll. So where are your sustainability efforts providing the most value creation right now? So most of you said in sort of revenue and reputation, interestingly, and competitive advantage. I'm sure plenty of that resonates with members of beer and our panel here, no doubt, particularly Simon, who we're about to hear from. Before that, let's launch our second poll before we get to hear from Simon. Bear with me. So our second poll is this. So in your opinion, do you feel the beverage industry is advancing environmental sustainability quickly enough? So give us your answers now, please. I'll leave this open for about 30 seconds. So select one of the following. Yes, I think the industry is advancing as fast as possible. Secondly, moderate, I think it's okay, but could move faster. No, I don't think the industry is moving fast enough, or don't know. So that will be really interesting to see what you guys think of how quickly things are moving. Let me close that one down and we'll come to the answers and the results of that shortly. Okay, so let's now move to Simon, who's going to give us a very condensed version of the Carlsberg story. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom. So today I'm just going to touch upon some of the reflections that we have from implementing sustainability into the business at the Carlsberg Group, and really bringing sustainability all the way into the hands of our consumers and customers, which is absolutely where we believe our sustainability initiatives should end up, not just in what you could call the back office of the company doing operational efficiency, but take that all the way to the hands of the consumers. And although all of the companies around the world are different, I hope that there are some of the things I'm going to show you today that can serve as an inspiration for some of you on the call. Next slide, please. So to start where Nick ended, so the first piece of advice is definitely to base your sustainability work on the most material issues, both to you as a business, but also to society. And if after this call, you basically go ahead and Google materiality assessment or materiality matrix, you will see a lot of different ways that you can conduct this. The way that we did it was with a mixture of external interviews, questionnaires, as well as the same on the internal front. So interviewing business leaders, people on the shop floor, on what they basically believe are the most important topics for us. And that is then condensed into this materiality matrix, which you can find in our most recent sustainability report that outlines which areas have the greatest business and societal value. This helps you to decide where to start and also focus on the things that will have the biggest contribution. So that's advice number one, to start out with material topics. Next slide, please. Secondly, one of the learnings that we have had is that if you involve the employees in the process of developing a sustainability program and not just in the end result, you will get a much more thorough strategy, but also a strategy that is faster to implement. A proverb is saying, what grows slowly has strong roots. And when it comes to employee involvement, this is absolutely true. So we trained more than 7,000 employees in 2016 before we launched our sustainability program in 2017. It wasn't the only topic that we discussed with the employees. We also discussed HR matters and compliance. But basically, some of the feedback we got in these training sessions were directly inputted into our strategy. A concrete example is that when we engaged with our Chinese colleagues and discussed climate change, they said it was, of course, incredibly important, but that air pollution as a topic in China was actually more important in the eyes of the public and the government and people living there. So that was why we actually decided to have a specific target on eradicating coal as a source of thermal heat completely from our business already by 2022, simply due to the feedback we got directly from our employees. Next slide, please. The third piece of advice is to make your sustainability program simple to understand, but without compromising the content. And from this, I mean that, us working within sustainability, we often have a tendency to talk about how complex everything is, how difficult it is, and how you can't capture it in one slide because it's very, very complex topics. With our program, we try to do that, so capture our ambition in one slide. And what you can see here are the 4 zeros in our program, Together Towards Zero, where we have the ambition to achieve 0 carbon footprint, 0 water waste, 0 irresponsible drinking, and a 0 accidents culture. And you will be able to see that there is a direct link to our materiality assessment that was in the first piece of advice and these 4 areas. So basically, we cover the most material topics in this, and then underneath it, we have a whole range of policies and compliance standards that are of course also in place, but in the necessity of clarity in the communication, we are communicating Together Towards Zero very clearly on these 4 zeros. And today I will only touch upon the first 2, given that the focus is on the environment today. Next slide, please. In creating targets and ambitions on sustainability, it's also a learning from our side that adopting what I call BHAG'S, or big, hairy, audacious goals, is very, very important to unleash innovation in the business. If you have kind of middle of the road, year-on-year developments or targets of 2% in your company, it is not likely to get the small hairs on the arms of employees or the outside world stand up and get people really excited and passionate. So one of the things we did was to be one of the first companies in Denmark to adopt science-based targets. And I believe we were also among the first 200 companies in the world to have approved science-based targets. For us, it doesn't only make sense due to the fact that it is what the world needs in order to combat the worst effects of climate change. It also makes sense for us because science is indeed in our blood. If you look at the gentleman standing in the back, then one of them is called S.P.L. Sørensen, and he was the head of the Carlsberg laboratory back in 1909. Actually, back then, he invented the pH scale at Carlsberg, which is basically made to make the quality of beer better. That is an innovation that the entire world has benefited from, and that is why we believe that science is truly in our blood, and therefore it made sense for us to also adopt science in our work on sustainability. Next slide, please. So when we then see some of that innovation that it has unleashed, we have an example in the Snap Pack. And the learning here is that in order to get the both internal and external passion unleashed, it's really a great idea to have certain flagship initiatives that you can use to explain to people what it is you're trying to do. So with the Snap Pack, we were one of the first brewers to start eliminating plastic rings that had been under some scrutiny for many years, by simply connecting our cans with the absolute minimum of packaging, just tiny dots of glue connecting the cans and thereby saying goodbye to unnecessary wrapping or plastic or rings. Next slide, please. Another piece of advice is to be very open in your process around implementing the strategy. So when you look in the middle, it's a project called the Green Fiber Bottle. That is a project we've been working on for 5 years. When I say that you should be open for unconventional partnerships, it really means that you should not close down your ideation internally just because you're facing adversity. Next slide, please. The unconventional partnerships that we have created to develop the Green Fiber Bottle is seen on this slide, where we are a proud partner of Paboco, the paper bottle the company, which then in turn works both with the pioneer owners, Billerud Korsnäs and Alpla, pioneer brands, which we were the first, but we are joined by L'Oreal, the Absolute company owned by Pernod Ricard, as well as Coca-Cola, but also pioneer development partners who are providing the technical insight. So when you see this slide, you can see that true breakthrough innovation is not easy, and it is something that takes time, and you need to allow the ability to incorporate unconventional partnerships into your work. Next slide, please. The last example, a piece of advice I will give you is based on this beautiful beer called Purist, which we launched in Sweden a couple of years ago. So basically this beer is brewed on sewage. So it is basically water cleaned to a level where it is cleaner than what comes out of the pipe in your household. And we sold this beer and marketed it in Sweden by putting a focus on the fact that today technology is actually good enough to clean water to that level of perfection and actually brew amazing beer. We do this to also challenge the conceptions or perceptions of what is possible and to show that there is definitely a sustainable future if we all of us are willing to put a little bit of skin in the game and do things in an unconventional way. Next slide, please. If you want to know more about some of the things that I've just shown you and told you about, you can always visit our homepage, carlsberggroup.com/sustainability, or go and follow us on our social media channels at LinkedIn, at Twitter, or on Instagram. And with that, I'll just say thank you for listening, and I hope that you got some inspiration on how you can make your company just a little bit more sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Love it. That's really useful and short presentation, but lots in there. And no doubt our audience will want to follow up with some specific questions for you later on, so we'll come to that. But thank you for that indeed. So let's have a look at the results of our last poll before we continue. So in your opinion, do you feel the beverage industry is advancing environmental sustainability quickly enough? And clearly most of you are kind of in that middle bracket, thinking it's okay, but could do more. And certainly some of you saying that it's not moving fast enough. So interesting results there. Thank you for that. Before we hear from Jens, let's just launch one more poll. This will be the last one, and this is just to gauge where you're at and where you're focusing your energy and your resources right now. What is your key sustainability focus area right now? So are you focused on agriculture? Are you focused on malting, brewing, packaging and distribution, or in the on-trade area, things like cooling? So give us your responses. It'd be good to see where you're all focused your efforts right now. I'll leave that just for a couple of seconds more, and then we'll close that and look at the answers very shortly. Thank you. So yeah, let's hear from Jens. And Jens Eichen at DuPont has plenty of experience in helping brewers get to grips with their sustainability. So let's hear from Jens.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks Simon and Nick. Very inspirational. I think that just to start, I'm joining from beautiful sunny Denmark, which is in northern part of Europe, which you probably all know. And just reflecting on Nick's response with regards to his kids. I have 4 of them, and I mean, I was joining a group some time ago when my oldest daughter was 20. And all these guys were talking about was sustainability, being a vegetarian. So I think that there's a lot of things moving on in the world as such. So I think this theme is very important. You can say, what has DuPont as such to do with sustainable brewing? Well, today we are delivering a lot of services and solutions to the brewing industry globally. And we are already today supporting projects and programs in order to save on energy, water, and also enabling the use of local raw materials. And that's, of course, by the use of our enzymes, but also solutions from other parts of DuPont. Let's go for the next slide, please. As you can see here, the trends in brewing is kind of a dynamic model. I put some of the trends here to the left, and I normally say that to innovate, you should also look beyond the familiar for long-term growth through customer focus and innovation. And I think that, as also said by Simon and Nick, I mean, UN Sustainable Goal number 17, Partnership for Goals, I think that's really should be in focus in the future users as much as you can in order to actually get new ideas in your toolbox. For this session, I would like to quote Ellen MacArthur as well. Quote, she's saying here, we need food that is nutritious and that is grown, produced and delivered in a way that benefits the health, the environment and the economy. I think that's very well said in that context of today. Next slide, please. So with regards to DuPont, we also have our own sustainability strategy that's centered around the now. So a bit like Carlsberg, we have our one slider. Our goals falls into three focal areas for DuPont. One is innovation. It's called Innovate Now. Another one is about operation. Our operation is like protect now, and it's about people, so empower now. And you can probably hear that I'm saying now, and now. It's more to reinforce the urgency to make progress now. And I would only say that we are ready for more of that together with you guys. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, just keep on that one for 1 second, Nick. I would probably take an example for UN Sustainable Goal number 6, just to make a kind of example before we go to the questionnaire as such. The Laminex portfolio is outstanding, I would say, and that's where you support mass filtration. So you optimize mass filtration in the brew house, the hot side of brewing, and then in the downstream, you can actually improve the throughput through your beer filtration equipment. And I think that's a prime example. So when you use some of our enzymes, especially the Laminex, you have water savings, you have extract loss decrease, and you have energy savings. Next slide, please. We have also developed together with Briggs of Burton, an engineering company owned by Seaman, that is a kind of a simulator for the brewhouse energy use. And just to give you an example here is that we can look at your current mashing profile, that is the combination of energy and time, or heat and time, and then we can simulate, or we can suggest a new kind of mashing regime for you, so you can actually save on energy, on water and so forth. Next slide, please. There's also, you can say, as said in the first part of my presentation, is there's a lot of focus on using local crops or being flexible with your brewing recipe as such. As you can see, for instance, barley is not very global as such. There's only 5% grown worldwide, but the other raw materials are much more in abundance. So I'd say for this, you could question yourself and say, do I need 100% barley in my brew going forward, or should I actually look on other raw materials in order to brew a lager more sustainable? And why I'm saying that, I'll come to that example right now, just to, you could say, give you a bit of a heads up on what that means for sustainability. Next slide, please. So this is this is one example. We have many, but this is one example from Argentina, where we have used the first flow here, the top flow, where you can see raw material production. So barley is coming in from the field, is going through into the warehouse. That barley is transported to the malt production site, or the malt house. Again, that malted barley is now transported by truck to the brewery, located in this example in Buenos Aires. They use our enzymes. That's, you can say, the top flow here is using 100% barley, local barley. If you look at the lower section of the slide, we have tried to say, okay, what about if you used local sorghum?
and there is actually a lot of Argentina sorghum as well. And you don't need to malt sorghum. So that sorghum is taken from the field. It's transported by truck to the brewery. And of course, enzymes from DuPont are used as well to make the beer. What is the impact if I actually changed my grist or my recipe for brewing from 100% malt, so the first or the top example, to adding about 80% local sorghum and 20% local malt into my grist? Next slide, please. So here you can see the different factors of sustainable, how we measure sustainability. So I'll just mention them. Climate change potential in kilo CO2 equivalent. So that's the CO2 emission impact as such. You have the non-renewable energy usage. You have the land use in square meters, and then the water consumption from, and that's important to say, this is from the field to the wort cooler in the brew house. Why didn't we take the whole brew house or the whole brewing part? Because if you compare 100% malt with 80% sorghum and 20% malt, everything downstream from the wort cooler is the same. So this is focusing on field to wort cooler. And as you can see here, if I changed my grist from 100% malt to 80-20, the climate change potential will be having about a 40% savings on kilo CO2 equivalents. With regards to energy use, 40% savings. With regards to land use, about 30% savings. Why is there savings on land use? That's because it's a special case in Argentina. The sorghum yield is quite high. Also compared to, for instance, in Africa, where it's very low. So you will see a lot higher land use for Africa. And then the water consumption is about the saving on 20% by, you can say, changing your recipe to another grist. So I think that's quite effective to show, but also to use going forward. Next slide, please. So all in all, my two takeaway, at least only looking at this sustainability path here, is partnership. I would say users for your sustainability implementation as well. And enzyme can support your sustainability agenda with water savings, energy savings, greenhouse gas savings, so the CCP, climate change potential, but also land savings in certain cases. Next slide, please. So as always, if you want to brew uniquely, come with us, talk to us, and you can see my contact details or the QR code. Call me or contact me, and I'm ready to take any questions from you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. Thanks, great. That's really interesting, actually. And I think, you know, those savings figures are incredibly compelling. Plenty of food for thought there. If we had some more questions, more detailed questions for Jens, do keep them coming in. We've had lots of questions so far, so that's great. And we'll get to them very soon and get some Q&A going for our last sort of 20-25 minutes of the session. Before we do that, let's just have a quick look at the results of the final poll that we ran. So yeah, so more than half of you are focused on the brewing aspect right now, quite a lot in packaging and distribution. I mean, we'll get onto our questions in a sec, but let me just quickly kick things off with a question that is directly linked to that poll, actually. Maybe each of our panelists can give me an answer, but you know, we all know that producing beverages is tough, but the real kind of sustainability game changer is in the raw materials and the supply chain. That's where the real impacts are, and that's where you can probably make the biggest difference. So why shouldn't companies just pour all of their resources, all of their focus and efforts and money into dealing with that rather than looking at their own operations? Who wants to kick that one off?
I can start, Simon here from Carlsberg. So I fully agree. So when we look at our, for example, total CO2 emissions, we see that around 40% of our value chain emissions, so in scope 3, lies within packaging. So it's obvious that any cent we put into improving the sustainability or CO2 emissions of packaging will give us back a much higher rate than brewing, which is only 13% of our total value chain emissions. But I think every single company in the world has a responsibility to start with what they directly control. And with us, we do that by, for example, having a target of 0 carbon emissions at our breweries. So the 13% in our value chain, that needs to go to 0 by 2030. If everybody did that, we would not have all of those emissions in the other parts of the value chain. And by the way, it is also quite a lot easier to control something where you have the ownership and you can directly influence it, whilst the rest of the value chain is more difficult. So that is why, from my perspective, you should start with yourself, what you directly control, and then move outwards.
And Tom, I can also answer or have a perspective from the brewing part at least, and of course it's there's some low-hanging fruit, like you say, okay, what is easy to implement? Where can I do some changes quickly? And it might be that you say, okay, let's go from barley to local crops like more sorghum, cassava, maize, or whatever. And then I could actually, I'm also supporting the local community, I'm supporting the local economy. So there are a lot of communication benefits of doing that, of course. So there are, you can say, things you can do quite fast. Of course, some of this you have to, where you have to use enzyme, that's of course for sure. But I think it's started where you control it. There's you also see chain integration, so the malting, the farmer and the brewer is actually working much closer together because they need to do something. And what is that? Well, partnership is key here. Yeah.
Okay, great. How about yourself, Nick?
Yeah, I would build on both of those. I mean, I think it is really critical that you just don't want to have a double standard. You know, we've always heard that analogy, walk the talk. So I've seen it where companies try to go into their suppliers and try to mandate their suppliers to do certain things. And if you're not doing that for your own operations, it's very hypocritical and it's going to be very, very clear. It's going to be a hard engagement from the very, very beginning. And then also your own employees. I mean, you need to build the culture, and where better to build the culture than your day-to-day operations, you know, and then it kind of feeds outward into your upstream and downstream efforts. But really critical to have your own house in order, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've got some great questions coming in actually, so let's get to those. Quite a few aimed at yourself, Simon. So one of our audience members says we've been able to brew a beer from sewage water at least since 2005, but top management has been reluctant to launch. So what is now news? I guess any advice to getting that sort of product to market?
So I can only, of course, base it on the beer we brew in Sweden. And let me just be clear, it was only one time we have done it so far, because the water that we used was quite expensive. We got it from the Swedish Environmental Institute, the IVL. But that said, I think the way we sold it internally and externally was through our customer. So the customer Systembolaget, they said that they would be happy to put it on the shelves if we brewed it. So we had the backing of a customer. And then the other part is that we of course made a new brand, Purist, instead of using a legacy brand, which I think could also help appease some of the internal concerns about doing it. So those were kind of, you know, two concrete things that we did in order to get the approvals internally to do it. And I think on the last point, I would just like to say we had no negative feedback as such. Of course, you have to be ready for a little bit of jokes around brewing a beer from sewage. But otherwise, I think the reception was very positive, and the beer sold out. Even though, you know, yeah, it was a small amount, but it sold out in Systembolaget.
Yeah. We had a couple. Yeah, go on. Sorry, Jens. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just and add to that. When I was also in the brewing industry some years ago, I had quite deep discussions with a wastewater company in a little or in the second largest town in Denmark, or city in Denmark, in Aarhus. It's called Aarhus Water, and they were actually serious. They wanted to build a little brewery next to the wastewater you can say plant, because the water coming out of that plant was actually cleaner than tap water.
Sure.
So I think that we need more of that going forward to actually show that yes, you can do it.
Yeah. We had a couple of questions come in that are on a similar sort of vein, talking about the supply chain. How important is the role of your suppliers in your sustainability approach, specifically Simon? Do you have clear expectations and requirements for them regarding sustainability? And how are you leveraging those in the final market product?
So of course it's a complex question, so I'll try to make a simple answer. So currently we do not have strict rules for our suppliers saying if you do not reach this target, we will stop using you. We are much more focusing on the collaborative approach. That is why our program is called Together Towards Zero. It's to signal that we want everyone on board. And to be very honest, we are going to use the soft approach where we do not kind of deem anyone out until it doesn't work anymore. And by this, I mean, if we can encourage our supply chain to decarbonize, for example, by showing them the benefits and using the carrot rather than the stick, that is the approach we would like to use. So for example, we are encouraging all of our suppliers to join the Science Based Targets initiative. That's, by the way, one of the very important parts of joining is to do advocacy on behalf of the Science Based Targets initiative. So we are, of course, very, very happy when we see suppliers joining, whether that was because of us or whether it was because of 2 or 3 of their big customers asking them to do it. That is absolutely a step in the right direction. Am I totally leaving out that in the future we will have more hardcore requirements? Absolutely no. We will for sure have that if it will be necessary to use the stick rather than the carrot. But for the foreseeable future, then we are right now succeeding with the carrot. And that is also the way we prefer to do business.
Yeah. I mean, attached to that, Simon, I'm interested in you talking about your target setting and how you get that balance right between being ambitious and promoting innovation, but also being realistic. I mean, you talk about your BHAG'S. Obviously, they're important, but what have you got any advice about how you actually get them approved through senior leadership, where you're just trying to strike that right balance? How do you do that?
So I think, first of all, of course, when we launched our program, we had 13 years to achieve the targets. So that gives you some time to actually improve your business in due time. But at the same time, it also puts pressure on you to start delivering from day one. And what we did in order to not just rest on our laurels towards 2030 was that we said by 2022, we want to achieve half. So that requires that we actually start today. And I think with really big, hairy, audacious goals, if you know all of the way towards achieving the goal, it is not a BHAG. So then it is just a normal target and everyone would do it. So there needs to be some feeling of discomfort in achieving the goals. Otherwise, they are simply not ambitious enough. So I guess showing the continued progress towards the targets is the way you show you deliver. But I would say that without a bit of a feeling of discomfort, you haven't made targets or goals that are ambitious enough to really make a dent. And by the way, to meet the needs of the planet. So if all of us just do middle of the road incremental things, then we will never ever achieve the goals set out in the Paris Agreement.
Absolutely, fair play, because it's not easier said than done, certainly. Let's have a look at some of the other questions, getting into the real nitty-gritty For you, Jens, could higher diastatic power malt substitute enzyme addition for producers who want to use only ecological, organic, or natural ingredients?
Well, it's a very specific question. So of course, diastatic power is measuring the enzyme content of the specific raw material. In this case, it's probably barley. And of course, it depends on which enzymes are present. So if you are thinking about, you can say organic, of course, you can always, I always say you can brew a beer if you have a good brewmaster or master brewer. You can do any beer, but of course, if you wanted to do it sustainable, then and do it, you can say, save on energy and water. I think that some of the specific enzymes which you actually cannot get from, you can say, the diastatic power as such, is specific silanases, specific beta-glucanases, which are actually really taking some of the viscosity increasing elements out of that, if you call it a word, that's a liquid coming from the brew house. Then of course it will be make you more sustainable in the end. Yeah, but again, it depends on also which kind of beer are you going to produce, if you need exogenous enzymes or not.
Yeah. Sorghum brewing is already well established in Africa and works efficiently. The taste is, however, not the same as barley malt brewing. Any news to achieve taste improvements? Somebody asks.
Well, it depends. If you ask me, of course, if you drink it cold like you normally drink a beer, then you can say what is the taste difference. Of course, there's a hint of that, but it also depends on the percentage of sorghum used. So, are you going from like 20? Are you going to 50? Are you going to 80? Or are you going to make 100% barley sorghum brewing? It all depends. But contact me and then we can have a discussion about it. But I think that yes, we can probably get to that in the future, I'm sure, where it tastes like a lager, which it should be. But you can also discuss what is the percentage of barley? Why do I need to have a minimum percentage of barley? Is that sustainable or not? That's a whole other discussion.
It is indeed, absolutely. This is something you touched on, I'm sure, in your presentation, but somebody asks, would you include the production of enzymes when using enzymes in the brewing process, since the production of enzymes would also include waste materials that could fall under the sustainability umbrella? That impact of the enzyme production is something you do look at, don't you, Jens?
Yes, we do actually. So when we do these sustainability measurements and calculation, it's all included. So what you saw on the slide I presented is also the impact of enzymes. So that's included. And I can only say that the benefits of using enzymes when you talk to the climate change potential and so forth, it's minimum. It's really small from our production. So the benefits are much bigger. But that's included in all the calculations. Yeah.
Okay. I have a quick question for Nick to bring Nick back into the conversation. Nick, in your opening sort of words, you talked about the need for strong leadership from people within companies. What if you've got a CEO or a CFO that just doesn't get this yet? I mean, what advice do you have for people that perhaps within companies and they're trying to get senior leadership to really sort of understand the importance of this stuff? Any advice for those guys?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I would tie back to what Simon and I both kind of focused on is, you got to tie what's material to your business. So, what drives business value? Either you avoid risks, you save money and become leaner and meaner and more profitable, or it helps you be competitive with your revenue, your reputation, your branding. So, figure what those topics are that really connect to your business. And then also, make that case. Try to be realistic with what can help you now, what is kind of a longer term play. You're seeing a lot of pressure points. I think, you got to bring those in too, that it used to be there was maybe one driver, but now if you look at all the drivers that are focused on sustainability, like I had, covered in my opening remarks, you have to look at the aggregate. So the aggregate of why do this, why do it now? Because, times have changed. Somebody brought up earlier, well, we've been able to do this for 5 years, but we just can't justify it. Well, today's different than it was 5 years ago. There's a lot larger appetite out there and a lot more incentives and reasons to pursue sustainability. So you're starting to see a lot of industries that typically were not necessarily sustainable starting to really put these commitments out there and jump on board. Oil and gas companies in the last several months have put out these ambitious, energy transition commitments and goals. So you're starting to see kind of that tide turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Question to you, Simon, specifically about the Paboco project, which obviously gained lots of attention. Can you give us some more details about the objective of the packaging and which types of packaging it's replacing? Is this really environmentally friendly given the limited biosource material? Obviously, I talk a lot in my work about sort of unintended consequences of switching from one thing to another, but can you give us a bit more detail about the kind of scale and scope for this packaging in the future?
Yeah, so very, very good question. It's a pleasure to get questions from experts. So first of all, the aim of the Green Fiber Bottle project is to create an alternative for our consumers. So I'm of the firm belief that our consumers should have access to many different types of packaging, not just one or two types, but many different types that can cater to their needs. And a bio-based and biodegradable at some point bottle that is fully recyclable as well is what we aimed out to do. And when we're looking at what the bottle should replace, in fact, we are not looking at it like that. We are looking at it as I said, offering a new type of product, and then the people who prefer a green fiber bottle can buy that, the ones who prefer cans can buy that, and the ones that want a glass bottle can buy that. When we're looking at the environmental profile, then we will only use FSC certified wood, fully certified and wood that is not contributing to deforestation. So basically the forest that will be harvested will be replenished at the same speed according to the FSC rules. And in fact, that's the beauty of working with Exogenous, who are absolute experts on forestry. So they have a lot of information on this and a lot of ways of doing it the right way. And secondly, having a bottle that is very, very different from what competition has out there, for example, is of course also a consideration. So if we can get access to a consumer group that would not otherwise buy beer or just feel like they want something that looks and feels different, well, if we can do that by making a more sustainable type of packaging, then we're definitely going to do that. And in terms of the LCA or the quantified environmental impact, we are aiming at the same low carbon footprint of the refillable glass bottle in an efficient system. So we're really benchmarking against the best type of circular packaging that we have today, and then saying that is where the final industrial production of the bottle should aim up at. But of course, it's a breakthrough innovation, so nothing is easy, and that's also why it's taken us 5 years to actually create a bottle that can hold our beer. But we keep working on it with the partners. And I think the very last question was on, so what other types of products? So the sky's the limit. As you saw right now, we have Coca-Cola, the Absolute Company, and L'Oreal on board. So then you can probably figure out what other products are going to be made. But for us, it's a collaborative project. We're not keeping it to ourselves. And Paboco can scale this to all of the different types of customers out there in the world, given that they can scale up their production. So everyone can benefit.
Sure. Okay. Interesting question just come in here. Maybe I can get a response from each of you. Isn't there sometimes a contradiction between natural, organic with possibly low yield, and sustainable, which could be achieved with less natural means? Any response to that from our panel?
So I can just briefly comment. So of course that in some instances there might be a slightly lower yield on organic malt production, barley malt production. But as we see it, it's a matter of improving that so that the yield becomes comparable to normal industrial. And also in the big scheme of things, when we look at our total beer in hand carbon footprint, that impact is not significant. So the difference between an organic ton of barley versus a traditionally produced ton of barley is not going to make the biggest difference in our global carbon footprint. So it's kind of a little bit, in Danish we have an expression where you say what you lose on the carousel, you gain on the merry-go-round. And in sustainability, there will always be cases like this. So it's not a zero-sum game. Sometimes it goes a little bit in the wrong direction, but has other positive benefits. And I think that's also the case with the whole plastic discussion. There are sometimes when you replace plastic, you get a slightly higher carbon footprint, but then you can say you have other derived benefits of not having used fossil fuel-based plastic. And that's what makes sustainability difficult, but also beautifully interesting, because you have all of these trade-offs. And then that's the role of a professional sustainability department, to help the company navigate those trade-offs and make the best possible decisions. And I think organic is a good example of that.
Yeah. Maybe a comment to that. Of course, you could normally use enzymes also for organic production, so I don't see that as an obstacle as such. I mean, I'm sure that we can combine sustainability with the natural movement as well. And of course, an enzyme is not changing the beer as such. It's removing some components. So I don't see that changing the beer. It's more making a combination of being natural and being sustainable. I think we need to look at both ways going forward.
Sure.
And maybe another comment is that, okay, enzymes are still processing aids and not ingredients. So there's also a difference regarding that aspects.
Absolutely. I'm conscious of time, and I don't want us to run out, and I don't know if we're going to get through all of these questions, but let's end with the $64 million question. Everyone agrees that sustainability is the right thing to do, but are consumers willing to pay higher prices for a more sustainable product? Who wants to go first?
Well, from if I take my perspective, it's not more expensive to implement sustainable goals. It's actually, can you afford not to? My comment.
So when you look at it, I think you're asking the wrong question, and I'm sorry to say that, but the question is not whether consumers are willing to pay more. The question is a little bit different. I usually use the 3 F's when you value whether something has value in sustainability terms. The facts, and that's the cost of the goods sold. It's all of the things on volume and so on. The fear, which is what is going to happen if you don't do anything? Are you going to have taxes imposed? And the faith. So do I believe that this will cater to a need that nobody else has seen, or that I will actually be able to sell more of this product? If you ask yourself those 3 F's rather than the simple, are they willing to pay more? Because anyone who's asked, are you willing to pay more for the same product, or something that is just a little bit more environmentally friendly, then the answer is likely going to be no. So I think you should ask a different question. You should ask yourself, where does my product fit within those 3 F's? And how can I find a value proposition that makes sense either to the customer, the consumer, or if you're business to business, to the company that I'm trying to help. So that would be my slightly more complex answer to the question.
I like the 3 F's. Nick, final word from yourself.
Yeah, I can't top the 3 F's. I mean, that's well said, Simon. I would just say that we're all seeing these trends move in this direction, and we're starting to see the tipping point between producing something that is sustainable versus using some traditional techniques, that it's starting to even out. And there's a lot of incentives. There's a lot of reductions in the cost of renewable energies, et cetera, that this is the trend where things are headed towards. Plus, you have a younger generation of consumers that are going to pay attention more so. So, it's more about the long-term play here for a company and just positioning their products and their company.
Absolutely. Thank you. In the interest of time, I think we do need to bring the conversation to a close. The panelists here and the team at DuPont will certainly look through the questions you've submitted that we didn't get around to answering, and they'll come back to you with some responses, I'm sure. But thank you all so much for being there and tuning in and taking part and submitting questions and you know, answering our polls and generally getting involved. It's been brilliant, so thank you for that. There will be a recording of the webinar session available in the next few days, so look out for that. You'll get a direct link sent to you. We're also going to do some write-ups and a brief transcription of what happened during the last hour, so that you've got something to share internally with your teams and your colleagues. So look out for that also. But a big thank you to our panel, to Jens, to Simon, to Nick. Thank you for your insights and expertise today. It's great. And you, our audience, we promised you'd walk away with 5 key takeaways to improving sustainability in brewing, and I think that you've probably walked away with many more than that. So so I'm happy with that, and I hope you are too. But thanks again, and goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye. Thank you very much.